Hey guys, tonight we take a slow, sleepy stroll through the dust and cobblestone of ancient Rome. Not as a senator, not as a centurion, not even as a toga-clad philosopher reclining on a chaise lounge. No, tonight you are a postal courier. And not just any postal courier, a Roman one, saddled with a donkey, a satchel full of half-melted wax tablets, and roughly 27 more miles to go before your next meal. Your back aches, your sandals are giving up on life, and there's a suspicious squeaking sound coming from the saddlebag that you've chosen to ignore. The donkey isn't in a rush. Honestly, neither are you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love reading those. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin the day at a dusty way station, somewhere just outside the walled edge of a modest Roman provincial town. Not quite the grandeur of Rome proper, but it has a forum, a handful of statues with missing noses, and at least two taverns with names involving Minerva and regrettable seafood. The postmaster, who also serves as the local chicken keeper and, suspiciously, the priest of Mercury, hands you a sealed letter case and gestures vaguely toward a donkey tied lazily to a post. The donkey predictably looks unimpressed. His name, for your purposes, is Tertius. Why? Because there were already two others today. He's third donkey of the day. You begin to sense the pattern of your importance here. Tertius is fitted with woven saddlebags, worn leather straps, and what might once have been decorative brass plates. The bells tied to his neck are more rust than ring, but they make just enough sound to keep wild dogs away. You load the mail, adjust your cloak to something vaguely travel-friendly, and nudge him toward the via. Roman roads, in theory, are marvels of engineering. Laid out in straight lines whenever possible, paved with meticulously arranged stone slabs and graded for drainage, they make modern city potholes look like an insult to civilization. In practice, however, they are also littered with donkey droppings, discarded amphora shards, and the occasional wandering chicken. The day is dry. Cicadas buzz with the intensity of a summer headache. You pass milestone markers, short stone pillars labeled with distances from Rome, each one chipped and sun-bleached, bearing the imperial symbol and a reminder that no matter how far out you are, you're still technically part of something very Roman. Your feet already protest the journey. The donkey does not care. You pause at a shallow ditch where another courier is trying to convince his mule to keep going. They're arguing in Latin. The mule is winning. You offer a sympathetic nod and trudge on. The letter case strapped to Tertius's side is a wooden box reinforced with iron. Inside, it holds documents wrapped in oilcloth, scrolls, folded papyrus, and those chunky wax tablets used for everyday correspondence. There's even a carved wooden tag listing your assigned route in case someone finds you unconscious near a wine shop and needs to redirect the mail. A good portion of the Roman Cursus Publicus, the state-run courier system, depends on people like you, exhausted, underfed, sun-baked travelers with above-average calves and the patience of saints. It's said Augustus himself established the system to keep tabs on the empire. You begin to suspect he never personally tested it during mosquito season. As Tertius plods forward, you hum a tune you half remember from a tavern in Gaul, something about oysters and heartbreak. A fly lands on your eyelid. You let it stay. The rhythm of hooves on stone becomes your heartbeat. Left, right, left, right. Sandals scrape. Donkey sigh. Repeat until eternity, or at least until the next milestone. Historians still argue whether the average Roman courier was a government employee, a contracted civilian, or simply someone who owed too many favors. Some were former soldiers. Others were slaves. Many were like you, anonymous, and exhausted. The wages weren't exactly glamorous, but it got you a roof at the relay stations, a ration of wine, and occasionally, if you were lucky, a boiled egg that didn't smell suspicious. As the sun climbs higher, you pass a roadside fruit seller napping under an olive tree. You consider stopping, but Tertius has found a rhythm now, his ears bobbing like metronomes. Break it, and you'll pay in stubbornness. Donkeys are creatures of habit, after all. You've seen one stop mid-road and refused to move for 6 hours. The air thickens with dust. In the distance, you spot a low stone arch marking the start of the next town. That's where you'll switch donkeys. If Tertius had feelings about this, he doesn't show them. You pat his flank and squint into the sun, already fantasizing about the cool clay jug of water waiting at the next mutatia, the Roman postal relay point. Your tunic sticks to your back, a drop of sweat slides down your temple. You pull your hood forward and lean into the march, one step at a time. There's nothing glorious about this job. No triumphal processions, no marble busts carved in your honor, just dust, hooves, and letters that might change a life or might just be a shopping list from one senator to another asking for better fish sauce. But for now, you walk, and the donkey walks, and the letters ride quietly beside you, bearing secrets you'll never read. And that's enough. You've been walking for what feels like days, though the sun tells you it's only been an hour and change. The heat is sneaky that way, more of a slow roast than a flash fry. Your sandals are already gathering tiny pebbles that conspire to ruin your arches, and your left knee is developing what scholars might generously call a personality. Tertius the donkey, meanwhile, plods along with the serene indifference of a marble statue. Up ahead, the road flattens out and the scenery stretches wide, a ribbon of via cutting across sunburnt fields and distant hills. This is Rome's miracle, the crown jewel of its infrastructure. A network of over 250,000 miles of roads, roughly 50,000 of which are fully paved. You're on one of the more moderately impressive ones, lovingly assembled from layers of gravel, stone, and sheer stubbornness. You reach down and tap a milestone, cylindrical, waist high, and inscribed with all the useful details. The distance from Rome, the name of the emperor who last funded the repairs, and probably some wishful thinking about how well the locals will maintain it. Spoiler, they won't. Milestones, you mutter. History's most passive-aggressive reminders that I'm still far from dinner. You check the iron tags tied to Tertius's bridle. Your route is straightforward. Continue this stretch for 12 more miles before switching animals. 12 more miles. You begin negotiating with your own legs. If they behave, you promise them a nap and possibly something fermented. At your feet, the mule shoes, yes, mules had shoes, click against the stone in a rhythmic percussion. Unlike horseshoes, which were nailed, mule shoes were often tied on like sandals with leather thongs or fitted as metal bands called hippo sandals. Imagine strapping tiny iron clogs onto your donkey and then hoping he doesn't step on your foot. That's your daily reality. Historians still argue whether hippo sandals were effective or just an elaborate excuse for yet another Roman tax. Some think they were essential for long-distance couriers. Others think they were an overpriced scam dreamed up by an ambitious farrier with a cousin in the Senate. You pass another courier heading the opposite direction. He offers a nod, the kind of silent solidarity that only those with chafed thighs and sunburnt necks can truly understand. His donkey, larger and fluffier than yours, lets out a sound that might be laughter or gas. It's hard to say with donkeys. The road rises into a gentle incline, and now you can see a full-mile marker line up trailing into the distance. They're evenly spaced like breadcrumbs for bureaucrats. Romans were precise that way. The Emperor Augustus even created a golden milestone in the Forum, the Miliarium Aureum, which claimed to be the point from which all roads in the empire began. You, of course, have never seen it. You're out here, hundreds of miles away on the dusty edge of things, trying not to fall into a ditch. You pause to rest near a shallow ridge and scan the horizon. Wild fennel grows along the roadside, brushing your legs like lazy whispers. A few cicadas land on your cloak. You let them stay. It's not worth the energy to flick them off. You lean against Tertius's warm side and pull out a strip of dried meat wrapped in fig leaves. It tastes like regret and boot leather, but it does the job. There's something comforting about the rhythm of the march, even when your feet hurt and the donkey smells like fermented hay. The predictability has a calming effect. One step, then another, then another. You pass a pair of children carrying baskets of olives. They wave. You wave back. Tertius ignores everyone. Somewhere in the distance, you spot the faint shimmer of a way station. You're still several hours away, but seeing it, even as a speck on the horizon, lifts your spirits a little. You begin counting the milestones aloud like a chant. Lapis unum, lapis duo, lapis tres. Every so often, the road cracks beneath your step. Beneath the surface, centuries of packed stone and crushed earth whisper their weariness. You imagine the thousands of feet that came before yours: soldiers, messengers, pilgrims, merchants, even emperors. Although, let's be honest, they were in litters, not on foot. The heat makes the world wobble. You tighten your cloak to keep the sun off your neck and try to stay in Tertius's shade. Not easy, considering he walks like he's inventing new geometries. A sudden breeze surprises you. It carries the sharp scent of sage and dust, with just a hint of donkey sweat. You take a deep breath and let it settle in your lungs like the first page of a boring but oddly comforting book. Maybe I'll write a poem about this, you say aloud. It'll be called Ode to My Donkey Who Resents Me. Tertius, to his credit, doesn't disagree. You pass a fallen milestone, cracked clean through the middle, probably hit by a careless ox cart. Someone's tried to balance the two halves with a plank and some rope. The result is half-mile markers, half modern art sculpture. It makes you smile. Romans were serious about their stone signage. Even when the empire wobbled, the milestones stood, or at least leaned dramatically. By now, the soles of your sandals feel like they've been steamed. You hop on one foot, adjust the strap, and promptly step into a puddle that smells deeply wrong. You sigh. The donkey snorts. You look up at the next milestone and tap it gently. The sun continues its lazy climb into the hazy blue of midday, casting long, shimmering ribbons of light that dance across the road ahead. Heat rises off the stones like invisible spirits, tired, sighing ones who've seen far too many sandals for their liking. You tug your cloak tighter around your shoulders, even though it's too warm, because there's something strangely comforting about being wrapped up like a well-meaning burrito. Tertius is trudging slightly faster now. Not much. This is still a donkey we're talking about, but just enough to make you wonder if he senses the next mutatio is near. Either that, or he's just building momentum for a new form of passive resistance you've yet to encounter. The relay station isn't exactly majestic. Think less imperial grandeur, more government-issue rustic. A flat-roofed stone building, a shaded stable to one side, and a surprisingly aggressive chicken who's decided to guard the door. Inside, it smells like sweat, hay, garlic, and administration. The station master, a broad-shouldered man with ink-stained fingers and a voice like gravel and wine, waves you in. He doesn't ask your name. He just gestures toward a chalkboard slab covered in scratched route notes and courier updates. Your name is probably listed somewhere between tired guy with donkey and late again. You hand over your cargo box. He nods, unlocks it with a small iron key, and begins sorting the contents into piles. Important, definitely not urgent, and probably personal, but who's checking? As per procedure, you're assigned a fresh donkey. Goodbye, Tertius. You may be cranky, smelly, and indifferent to my emotional needs, but I'll miss you. Your new companion is named Lucilla. She's leaner, shorter, and has eyes that suggest she's seen things. Ancient things, possibly involving senators and pickled eels. Lucilla doesn't like you. You know this immediately. She flicks her ears, snorts once, and begins chewing on the corner of your cloak. You sigh, adjust your belt pouch, and climb back into the sun. The relay system, for all its quirks, is surprisingly efficient. Rome placed mutations roughly every 8 to 12 miles, enough to switch animals, refresh the cargo, and inhale a bowl of stew that tastes like it was made by someone angry at vegetables. You skip the stew this time. You've made that mistake before. Historians still argue whether these stations were staffed entirely by imperial employees or subcontracted to local communities with varying degrees of competence and enthusiasm. Evidence suggests a mix of both. Some way stations ran like clockwork. Others ran like clocks dropped down a well. You're back on the road now, Lucilla carrying your new letter case with all the indifference of a cat being asked to swim. The terrain changes slightly. Gentle hills, scattered trees, and the occasional vineyard stretch out on either side. You catch a whiff of rosemary as you pass a low stone wall dotted with lizards. They scatter as you approach, like miniature guards abandoning their posts. At one point, you stop to let Lucilla drink from a roadside trough. The water is murky, but she slurps it down with gusto. You, ever the seasoned professional, pop a few grapes into your mouth and instantly regret it. They are not ripe. In fact, they may be decorative. As you walk, you begin noticing strange little roadside altars, stone platforms with carved niches, sometimes holding crude figurines or old coins. These are lararia, places where travelers offer prayers to the household gods, hoping for protection on the road. You toss a tiny bronze coin into one and murmur something vaguely respectful. Watch over this donkey, or at least stop her from kicking me. Lucilla flicks her tail. There's a myth that Mercury, the messenger god, once disguised himself as a donkey to test the endurance of human couriers. You wonder what he would think of Lucilla. Probably promote her. She's stubborn enough to run an empire. You pass a stretch of road flanked by crumbling statues, once noble tributes to forgotten senators, now looking like melted wax in the sun. One has a nose shaped like a banana. You salute it. Around midday, you encounter a cohort of soldiers marching the opposite direction. Their armor glints like teeth, and their formation is tight enough to bounce a denarius off. They nod at you as they pass, and one even offers a half smile. You nod back, resisting the urge to ask if they're willing to trade their horses for a very suspicious donkey. Lucilla stops suddenly. Dead halt. You jolt forward like a sack of figs and look up. She's spotted something. A snake, a ghost, a particularly large shadow, doesn't matter. She won't move. You stand there, sweating and bargaining. After several awkward minutes, you resort to singing. You hum a marching tune from your childhood, something about carrots and emperors. Lucilla twitches one ear. Progress. You begin full-on serenading her with increasingly off-key lyrics. Eventually, she snorts, shakes her head, and resumes walking, as if to say, "Fine, I'll move. Just stop whatever that was." You're relieved, and a little hurt. The road stretches on. The sky begins to tilt toward afternoon gold. Shadows lengthen, and your own grows beside you like a quiet companion. The postal system, this strange, winding network of stone and sweat, connects the empire like veins. Messages, orders, gossip, military reports, love letters, all passed from donkey to mule to cart to foot. You are one of thousands. You carry words. And today, thanks to Lucilla's grace and your questionable singing voice, those words are moving forward. The sun dips low enough that the light turns syrupy, thick, amber, and quietly smug about how it makes everything look prettier. Even the dust glows golden now, clinging to your sandals like it's proud to have made the journey with you. Lucilla, for her part, is slightly less ornery than she was this morning. Not friendly, mind you, just less homicidally unimpressed. You settle into a familiar rhythm, the soft clop of hooves, the creak of your leather satchel, the occasional metallic clink of the message box bouncing gently against your hip. The silence between sounds becomes its own kind of music, sleepy, slow, the perfect tempo for a nap you can't afford to take. Off to the side of the road, a shepherd waves from his post among a small flock of sheep. You wave back. The sheep stare with the full existential intensity of animals that know they were once sacred in someone's religion. You consider asking Lucilla if she's feeling philosophical. She chews a thistle and pretends not to hear you. Ahead, a gentle rise in the road reveals your next destination, Amancio, one of the Empire's larger rest stops for long-distance couriers. Bigger than a mutatio, these places offered real food, real beds, and, allegedly, real wine. Though what passed for real after 20 miles in sandals was up for debate. This particular mancio is surrounded by a modest courtyard dotted with cypress trees and carved stone benches. A fountain bubbles in the center, fed by an aqueduct running unseen beneath the road. You lead Lucilla to the trough and head inside, ducking through a low stone archway into the cool dimness beyond. The interior smells of oil lamps, roast lentils, and bureaucracy. A young attendant, likely still in training, judging by the ink on his face, greets you with an eager nod. He points you toward the check-in scroll. You sign with a flourish, entirely unsupported by your actual handwriting skill. While your documents are being verified and your new instructions prepared, you collapse onto a bench in the corner. It's the best thing you've sat on all week. It doesn't even matter that it's made of marble. Compared to Lucilla's bony spine, it's like being hugged by Jupiter himself. Historians still argue whether mansions were standardized across the empire or if local governors had leeway to interpret comfort however they liked. Judging by this one's lack of pillows and abundance of beans, you suspect the latter. You're handed a wooden tray with tonight's dinner, barley stew, some kind of flatbread, and what may or may not be boiled chicken. You stare at it. It stares back. You eat it anyway because you are a creature of habit and also because your stomach is making noises like an amphora rolling down a temple stairwell. After your meal, you explore the courtyard. There's a mosaic underfoot, faded but still legible, depicting Mercury handing a scroll to a donkey. You feel strangely seen. One of the station's older attendants, a man with eyebrows like hedgerows, leans on a pillar and strikes up a conversation. You learn that this route has been running for over 2 centuries. It was once used by legions, then merchants, then tax collectors. Now it's mostly used for political gossip and reports about grain storage levels in provinces no one can pronounce. He tells you that during the reign of Claudius, a letter from Britannia took just 9 days to reach Rome. 9. That's faster than some modern inboxes. You raise an eyebrow and ask if the donkey had wings. He chuckles. Worse, it had an imperial seal. As the sun kisses the horizon, you're shown to your cot. It's lumpy and squeaks like a frightened mouse every time you shift, but it's horizontal and doesn't move, which puts it firmly in the top 5 beds of your courier career. You stretch out, one arm draped across your bag, the other loosely shielding your face from the last golden rays of the day. You don't fall asleep. Not yet. The quiet is too interesting. Through the window's slats, you hear someone playing a double pipe instrument near the stable. The sound is light and meandering, like a tune trying to remember itself. Somewhere, a donkey brays. You sincerely hope it's not Lucilla arguing with the innkeeper. You close your eyes and think about all the miles you've walked today, about the letters you carried, the ones still waiting for you tomorrow, and the strange, slow machine you're a part of, this living web of roads, donkeys, and parchment. You wonder how many others are sleeping in similar cots, dreaming similar dreams about grapes and foot blisters. And then it hits you. This whole thing, the roads, the way stations, the lumpy beds, it's not just about mail. It's about presence. Rome didn't just conquer with swords, it conquered with footprints. Messages arrived, orders were followed, the empire worked because it was there, physically, relentlessly, and slightly donkey-scented. The stars are out now, and a breeze ruffles your hair. You turn on your side and mumble something half prayer, half snore. Tomorrow you'll get new orders, new roads, maybe even a mule this time. For now, though, you rest. The next morning arrives not with a dramatic sunrise or the crowing of some romanticized rooster, but with the familiar wet snort of a donkey directly in your face. Lucilla has found you. You open one eye. There she is, head poked through the stable gate, chewing on something that definitely isn't food and might have once been someone's sandal. You sigh, rub your eyes, and remind yourself, quietly, calmly, that you are a respected imperial courier, and not, as it currently appears, a sleep-deprived donkey wrangler with dreams of retiring to a vineyard in Gaul. You gather your gear, stretch your stiff legs, and return to the front desk. A new station clerk greets you, a middle-aged woman with piercing eyes and the efficiency of someone who has no patience for poetry before breakfast. She hands you a wax-sealed packet, heavy in your hand. Your next assignment. The orders are simple, in that Roman way of making complicated things sound like a stroll. Deliver this dispatch to a military outpost 2 days east, near the borderlands, where rumors of bandits and logistical failures swirl like smoke. You smile politely, try not to look nervous, and give Lucilla a pep talk that includes the phrase, "Let's not die dramatically." Back on the road, the world has shifted. You're no longer in the settled belly of the empire. The terrain is rougher here. Fewer vineyards, more scrubland. The trees are knotty and suspicious. The road still holds its shape thanks to centuries of paving stones and relentless engineering, but now it feels like you're walking the edge of the map. Lucilla seems to know. She's watchful. Not skittish, just alert. Her ears swivel with the wind, and she quickens her pace when shadows lengthen. You trust her instincts more than your own. After all, she's survived more couriers than you'll ever meet. The day unfolds slowly, like a scroll being unrolled by someone distracted. Around midday, you pass the remains of a crumbled Roman milestone, a stubby pillar half swallowed by moss. The inscription is barely legible, but it once proudly declared how far you were from Rome, as if Rome is the center of everything, and even out here in the dust and wind, you're still tethered to it. Historians still debate how psychologically effective these milestones were. Did they make travelers feel connected, or merely remind them how far they had left to go? You snack on a handful of dried figs and a crust of travel bread, so dense it could double as a building material. There's a nearby stream, shallow and singing to itself. You let Lucilla drink while you soak your sore feet, sighing at the sensation of cool water against warm skin. A frog hops onto your boot and stares at you, as if to say, "This is my spot." You don't argue. You move. By late afternoon, you spot a curious structure in the distance, half buried in earth, roofless and crooked. A watchtower, long abandoned. You climb it out of instinct, dragging Lucilla along until she flatly refuses to ascend stairs. From the top, the view is stunning in its quiet menace. The land stretches like a sleeping beast, broken only by clusters of trees and narrow, glinting rivers. You can see smoke in the far distance. A settlement? A fire? Hard to tell. You descend, pat Lucilla, and continue. As dusk approaches, the road takes an unexpected turn, literally. It dips into a narrow valley where the light fades faster and shadows gather like bored cats. You find a small clearing just off the road, sheltered by stone outcroppings. It's not an official stop, but you've slept in worse places. You tie Lucilla loosely, she knows better than to run, and set up your humble camp. Dinner is a mix of olives, hard cheese, and a dried meat product that defies both definition and chewability. You chew thoughtfully anyway, listening to the crackle of your tiny fire and the rustle of small creatures in the bushes. You tell yourself they're all adorable hedgehogs. You do not consider the alternative. You wrap yourself in your cloak and lie on your side, staring up at a patch of sky freckled with stars. The air smells of dust and pine resin. Somewhere, an owl hoots, and Lucilla answers with a snort so judgmental you feel personally attacked. You think about the packet in your satchel. You haven't read it. Imperial couriers aren't supposed to. But curiosity hums around its edges. Is it orders for a local garrison? A census correction? A strongly worded reminder to pay temple taxes? You'll never know. Your job is to carry it, not understand it. There's something oddly freeing about that. You're a moving part in a colossal machine. A living thread in the fabric of Rome's reach, and while it might not earn you statues or epic poems, it earns you something else. Stories. Little ones. Ones that smell like donkey sweat and taste like old bread and sound like hooves in the dark. You close your eyes. The road will still be there tomorrow. You wake to dew on your eyebrows and Lucilla snoring louder than the breeze. It's early, very early, but that's when couriers move best. The world hasn't quite remembered it exists yet. It's like walking through the last quiet moment before someone coughs in a theater. You stretch, bones protesting like overworked senators, and pack up camp with a kind of sleepy precision that only repetition can teach. Lucilla eyes you balefully until you offer her a piece of carrot. It's unclear where the carrot came from. Best not to ask. As you return to the road, the landscape begins to shift again. The hills grow steeper, dotted with stubborn trees and occasional ruins, the skeletal remains of villas, once grand, now nibbled into irrelevance by time. A collapsed archway juts out of a hillside like a tooth, vine-wrapped and dramatic, as if trying to remind someone that it used to be important. Historians still argue whether these isolated villas were retreats for the rich or exile points for the inconvenient. Either way, they make good markers. You pass one with an intact mosaic floor, exposed like a peeled fruit. It shows a man wrestling a fish. You pause, admire it, then trip over a loose stone and feel slightly less poetic. Mid-morning, you reach another mutatia. A small one this time, just a couple of low buildings and a bored-looking teenager feeding hay to a mule. She waves as you approach and offers a water bucket without being asked. You make polite conversation while Lucilla drinks deeply and pretends she doesn't need a break. You ask the girl if anything strange has happened on the road recently. She shrugs. A goat gave birth in the storeroom last week. You nod solemnly as if this is somehow strategic intelligence. After a quick bite, some dried dates and a wedge of questionable cheese, you're off again. The road tightens into a narrow path flanked by low stone walls, probably older than both of you. You wonder who laid these stones, what they dreamed about, whether they ever got blisters in the same weird spot on their left heel. By early afternoon, the sun is blazing. You drape a damp cloth under your helmet and imagine yourself as an overcooked vegetable. Lucilla's ears droop. She's walking slower now. You whisper encouragement and a few bribes. She responds by trying to eat your map. You pass a cluster of travelers heading the opposite way, Two traders with camels, a priest in a threadbare tunic, and a boy carrying a bundle of reeds taller than himself. You nod in greeting. They nod back. No words needed. Everyone on this road understands the rules. Nod, move on, don't ask questions about the cargo unless it's bleeding. Eventually, the road flattens and opens into a wide plain. You spot the distant shimmer of rooftops, a small border outpost built more for presence than comfort. Just a handful of stone buildings, a wooden palisade, and one very bored soldier leaning on a spear that's probably older than he is. As you approach, the guard squints at you like you might be a hallucination. Then, seeing Lucilla, he waves you through. You present your seal and packet to the officer in charge, a wiry man with a nose like a hawk and handwriting that would make a senator weep. He opens the packet, reads the contents, and immediately begins swearing under his breath. Something about the grain again, and I told them we're not a barn. He thanks you, sort of, and tells you to wait for a response dispatch. You nod. That's always the way. There's never just one letter. While the response is written, you explore the outpost. It's minimal. There's a weapons rack, a kitchen that smells of onions and sadness, and a tiny shrine to Mercury tucked in a corner. You light a bit of incense, out of habit or gratitude or maybe just superstition. The god of messengers deserves his due, after all. Lucilla, meanwhile, is making friends with a young donkey named Rudolus. They sniff each other politely, then promptly ignore one another in the way of seasoned colleagues. You smile. Even donkeys have professional etiquette. When the officer finally hands you the return scroll, he warns you, "Deliver this fast. Rome's going to scream if the next barge of grain shows up late again." You don't mention that screaming is above your pay grade. You just nod, tuck the scroll into your satchel, and turn back to the road. As the sun begins to dip, painting the sky in lazy smears of orange and lavender, you and Lucilla begin the long walk back. It's not glamorous. It's not glorious, but it's necessary. Someone has to keep the empire stitched together with hooves, ink, and very stubborn animals. You reach a ridge that overlooks the valley you crossed earlier. In the fading light, it's almost beautiful. Soft hills, thin mist, a line of geese arguing over a pond. You pause, take it in. Then Lucilla shoves your elbow with her head, and you nearly drop the scroll. Right, back to it. You make camp that night beneath the protective shadow of a wind-worn olive tree. Lucilla drops almost immediately into sleep, legs tucked beneath her, tail twitching with residual donkey dreams. You, meanwhile, stare at the stars. They're the same ones every Roman from Britannia to Bithynia sees, and you wonder if someone else is doing the same thing right now. Some other courier with a different donkey, a different burden under the same constellations. There's something comforting about that. The empire may be impossibly vast, but the night sky shrinks it back down to something you can hold. You drift off to the sound of insects chirping and Lucilla snoring, already preparing for the next day of familiar motion. By dawn, you're up again, legs aching in that well-worn way, and you're back on the road with Lucilla, heading west. The return leg always feels longer. Maybe it's because the mystery is gone. Or maybe because the scroll in your satchel now contains a set of instructions that could affect hundreds of lives, and you can't help but feel its weight, though it's light as parchment. Today, the wind has picked up. Dust dances across the road, and you pull your hood lower to keep your eyes clear. Lucilla doesn't seem to mind. She's focused, determined, with the same slow, deliberate gait she's had since day one. You respect her for that. She has one speed, and it's inevitability. Around mid-morning, you pass a small roadside shrine dedicated to Sylvanus, god of the wilds and boundaries. It's tucked between two gnarled trees, almost hidden by ivy. Someone has left a slice of honey cake there, and the bees are thrilled. You add a small fig from your pouch because you never mess with road gods, and whisper a quiet thanks. Historians still argue whether these tiny shrines served more as religious devotion or psychological checkpoints for lonely travelers. Either way, they matter. The road isn't just physical, it's emotional, mental. A journey not just through space, but through fatigue and repetition, and wondering whether your last pair of sandals will make it another 10 miles. A little after noon, you come upon another mutatio, and this one is lively. A small merchant caravan is stopped there. 3 carts loaded with amphorae, bolts of fabric, and what smells like garum, the famously pungent fermented fish sauce that can clear a room faster than an open sewer. You exchange pleasantries with a round-faced merchant who insists on showing you a piece of dyed wool so blue it nearly hurts your eyes. He swears it was imported from India. You nod, partly to be polite and partly because Lucilla has just stolen a date from his lunch basket and you need to keep things cordial. He doesn't notice. Or if he does, he pretends not to. That's the rule of the road. Small crimes are forgiven if your donkey is charming. The station keeper, a wiry old man with a perpetual squint, recognizes your seal and waves you through quickly. He hands you a warm flatbread and nods toward the well. You refill your skin, dunk your face in the cold water, and let the relief settle into your bones. You could stay here for an hour. You probably won't. The scroll in your bag is like a quiet drum beat. Lucilla, meanwhile, is in a heated staring contest with a goat. You decide not to intervene. If it escalates, it's between them. Back on the road, you find yourself humming a half-forgotten tavern song. It's about a man who tried to deliver wine to a temple and got distracted by a dancing bear. The bear ends up being more competent than the man, and by the final verse, she's been promoted to head priestess. You're not sure it's based on historical fact, but it feels emotionally accurate. As the afternoon stretches on, you pass a field full of low stone walls, the remains of a cemetery, or perhaps a family plot long since abandoned. Most of the inscriptions are worn smooth. One stone remains legible: Lucilla, beloved sister. She laughed like spring. You pause. It's strangely moving, even out here on the edge of nowhere. Lucilla walks ahead, patient. You catch up. The road begins to curve uphill again, and the view opens into a long valley filled with waving grasses and distant vineyards. You're approaching familiar territory. Rome isn't exactly just over the hill, but it's on the same continent at least. Still, you're not done yet. As the sun dips behind a ridge and shadows grow long, you find a dry patch beside a hedge of rosemary and call it home for the night. Dinner is a shared apple, a hunk of bread, and the satisfaction of a good day's pace. As you lie back and close your eyes, you hear something rustling in the hedge. Lucilla lifts her head and snorts once. Then nothing. Probably just a lizard, or a very stealthy senator. Either way, you're too tired to care. The stars are out again, so is the moon, and the road always continues. You wake to the smell of rosemary and the sound of Lucilla chewing very noisily on something she definitely wasn't supposed to find. You roll over, groan, and then sit up. The sky is the pale gray blue of a day not yet decided, and the breeze carries the scent of dust and the distant promise of bread baking somewhere you aren't. You stretch, shoulders popping like overripe olives, and check the satchel. The scroll is still dry. That alone feels like a small miracle. You give Lucilla a half-hearted glare, which she ignores with practiced indifference. The donkey is the embodiment of bureaucracy, slow, unshakable, and impossible to impress. Today's stretch of road winds through a more populated stretch of countryside. Villas pepper the hills like forgotten laundry, each surrounded by orderly rows of olive trees or grapevines. You pass workers already in the fields, their chatter blending with the bird song. Some glance your way, most don't. A courier is a common enough sight, not interesting unless you're delivering something for them. A pair of boys run ahead of you briefly, pretending to be charioteers, brandishing sticks and making sound effects that would terrify an actual horse. You let them pass without comment, but Lucilla gives them a look that can only be described as ancient disdain. Mid-morning, you spot smoke curling up from a stone hearth. You're approaching a larger mantua, not just a relay point, but a full overnight station. These are rare luxuries on the route, spaced many miles apart and usually staffed by a mix of retired soldiers, cooks, and whichever civil servants failed upward into stationary jobs. The gate is open, and a woman with a scar across her chin and an apron dusted in flour welcomes you like you're an old friend. Her name is Terentia. You've met her once before, months ago. She doesn't remember, but Lucilla does, because Terentia once gave her a fig tart. Inside, you hand off your seal, sign a battered ledger, and are shown to a room with a straw-stuffed mattress that looks suspiciously clean. It's almost unsettling. You sit, you exhale, and for the first time in days, you remove your sandals without immediately regretting it. The cook delivers a bowl of lentil stew and some of that bread you'd been smelling earlier. It's warm, spiced with coriander, and disappears faster than a provincial tax collector in audit season. Historians still argue whether these mansions were primarily built for utility or as symbols of state control, like tiny embassies embedded into the empire's own nervous system. Whatever the reason, you're grateful for them. Without stops like this, the Cursus Publicus would collapse under its own hoofbeats. As you eat, a scribe at the next table grumbles about the ink supply. He's been waiting 3 days for a shipment that's probably stuck in Ostia, being fondled by port officials. You sympathize. Bureaucratic chaos is the one true constant of the Roman world, possibly even more consistent than Lucilla. After resting, refilling your flask, and politely declining an invitation to stay the night, tempting though it is, you collect your response packet, double-check its wax seal, and step once more into the sun. Your route now skirts an ancient aqueduct, its towering arches slicing the sky like ribs of a sleeping titan. You follow its shadow for several miles, comforted by the cool breeze that seems to cling to its stony flanks. A pair of storks perch high above, gossiping about things you'll never know. You hum a little tune to yourself, one of those half songs you don't remember learning, but which always returns in quiet moments. Lucilla walks beside you, steady and slow, ears flicking occasionally at flies or existential dread. You pass another traveler going your way, a woman leading a cart full of amphorae stacked like sleepy soldiers. She nods at you. You nod back. She glances at Lucilla, then at your seal, and murmurs, "Good luck," in a tone that suggests she knows something you don't. You don't ask. It's probably better that way. Toward late afternoon, the road winds uphill again. You spot a weathered milestone, half buried in grass, inscribed with the faint outline of Emperor Hadrian's name. A piece of history you almost miss. You rest your hand on it for a moment, part superstition, part respect. At the top of the hill, you pause to take in the view. A ribbon of road stretches behind you. Ahead, in the distance, a larger town stirs with the gentle chaos of twilight commerce. Bakers shout, dogs bark, and someone is already playing the lyre badly. It's another few miles yet, but you'll get there. You always do. You glance at Lucilla. She snorts as if reading your thoughts and keeps walking. By the time you reach the outskirts of the town, the sun has begun its descent, spilling long amber shadows across cobblestone streets and tiled roofs. The town is modest by Roman standards, maybe 600 residents on a good market day, but after open road and whispering shrubs, it feels positively metropolitan. You and Lucilla clatter over a worn wooden bridge, the boards groaning with every step. Beneath, a narrow stream runs low and sleepy, more algae than water. A pair of children lean over the railing, daring each other to drop pebbles near your hooves. One of them hisses "messenger" with something like awe, as if you were a myth passing through. It's not far from the truth. In these small towns, the arrival of a government courier is a brief disruption in the usual rhythms, like the moon showing up at breakfast. You steer Lucilla toward the local tabularium, a squat building with fading frescoes of Jupiter scowling nobly at passersby. Inside, a low desk guards a strong room filled with clay tablets and sealed scrolls, each tucked into cubbies like overworked doves. A scribe with impressive eyebrows accepts your packet without fanfare, scratches your name into a wax tablet, and waves vaguely at the guest room. You thank him and mean it. Tonight, you get a real roof, a ceramic oil lamp, a basin of water slightly less green than usual. It's practically a five-star spa. You even let Lucilla nose around the courtyard garden where she attempts to eat someone's potted laurel bush. You both have regrets. After washing up, you venture into the town square, which buzzes with early evening energy. Merchants are packing up, dogs are barking at wind that may or may not exist, and someone's playing a pan flute badly enough to be charged with a civic disturbance. You find a small food stall manned by a wiry man with the posture of a question mark. He offers you a triangle of honey-soaked cake and a hard-boiled egg. It's the best thing you've eaten in days. As you sit on the edge of a fountain, feet dangling, cloak wrapped tight, you overhear a debate between two older men about whether the emperor's latest tax law applies to goats. One argues that since goats possess independent will, they are technically taxable entities. The other counters that goats possess only chaos. Neither is wrong. Historians still argue whether animals in rural Rome were truly considered legal property or occasionally treated as economic citizens. There's anecdotal evidence of a parrot being declared the heir of a minor official in Gaul, but that could also just be a joke that grew too old to die. The moon is high when you return to your room. You check the satchel again, out of habit, empty for now. Lucilla sleeps near the stable wall, legs tucked under, one ear twitching at imagined flies. You lie on a straw mattress and listen to the sounds of a town shutting down, shutters closing, conversations trailing off, one final lonely donkey bray echoing from somewhere you can't see. You don't dream of glory. You dream of sandals that don't chafe and inns that always serve warm stew. You dream of small towns where you're not just a passing seal on parchment, but maybe, just for a moment, someone who belongs. At dawn, you're back on the road. Of course you are. The next few days pass in a pattern so familiar you could walk it blindfolded. Rise, walk, deliver. Eat whatever the gods send your way. Curse the saddle, bless the breeze. Sleep beneath stars with only Lucilla and the occasional curious hedgehog for company. But on the third evening out, something different happens. You arrive at a mutatio, expecting the usual. Thin soup, stale bread, someone's uncle trying to sell you a calendar of Roman gods posed heroically. But instead, you find panic. The station donkey is missing. Apparently, a low-ranking courier arrived that morning, tied the donkey outside to a fig tree, and went inside for a nap. When he returned, both donkey and tree were gone. Stolen, perhaps. Or the donkey just got tired of figs and left. The details are foggy. You're offered the use of a goat instead. You decline politely. They then offer to borrow Lucilla just for a quick run to the next station, they say. Just a few hours. You don't even dignify that with a response. Lucilla snorts something that sounds like absolutely not. You eat in silence, slightly proud of your uncooperative beast. Later that night, as you scratch her behind the ears, you wonder what she'd say if she could talk. Probably something dismissive about goat efficiency. The scroll you're carrying now isn't urgent, just a census report, most likely inaccurate, detailing the approximate population of 8 different villages that may or may not still exist. But you carry it anyway, because someone needs to. And besides, without the weight of parchment, would the road feel the same beneath your feet? The stars are out again. The wind picks up, tugging at your cloak. The night smells like thyme and the faint promise of rain. Tomorrow is another dozen miles, another dozen small challenges, another scroll passed hand to hand until it reaches someone who probably doesn't care. But you'll care, because the system works. Not perfectly, not quickly, but it works, because of donkeys, because of you, and because someone, somewhere, is still waiting. You wake to drizzle, not a downpour, just a lazy, sideways mist that sneaks under your cloak and settles into your bones like gossip. The road ahead glistens in patches, puddles collecting in wheel ruts made long before you were born. Lucilla is unimpressed. She gives you the look. The one that says, "We could still be sleeping, you know." You ignore her, adjust the scroll satchel across your shoulder, and trudge forward. The drizzle turns the landscape into something soft-edged and dreamlike. Fields blur into olive groves. Trees lean in close, murmuring secrets in the language of dripping leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a farmer yells at a mule, possibly in poetry. This section of the route winds through what used to be a military road, straight as a spear for miles at a time. It was built under the command of some long-dead general whose name is still etched into a crumbling milestone a few kilometers behind you. You didn't stop to read it. You already know how those inscriptions go. By order of the Senate, something about glory, and a whole lot of words chiseled with great effort and very little subtlety. The road itself is holding up well, all things considered. Roman engineering, after all, was stubborn. These stones were laid with the intent to outlive empires, and they just might. Halfway through the day, you pass a group of traveling merchants, headed the opposite direction. Their carts are loaded with pottery, salt fish, and a crate that's either filled with squawking geese or one very opinionated oracle. You nod to the lead driver, who responds with a grunt and a warning. Bridge ahead's out. River's too high. You'll have to ford upstream. Lucilla stops chewing her thistle and raises an eyebrow. You sigh. When you reach the bridge, or what's left of it, you understand. A swollen creek now cuts across the road like a deliberate act of defiance. The wooden planks lie twisted downstream, tangled in reeds and someone's sandal. You debate waiting it out. But the message you carry has a seal, and seals mean time, and time means walking. You follow a deer trail upstream where the water narrows and the banks are firmer. Lucilla steps carefully, placing each hoof as if auditioning for a particularly grim ballet. You follow behind, muttering encouragement and apologies with equal sincerity. At one point, your left sandal fills entirely with mud. The other one, not wanting to be left out, promptly splits at the seam. You carry on barefoot, slipping occasionally, earning an amused side eye from your four-legged coworker. Eventually, you make it across. Soaked, cold, and now smelling vaguely of wet marble, you sit beneath a chestnut tree to wring out your cloak and examine your dignity, which turns out to be missing. Lucilla finds something edible nearby, probably not food, but she eats it anyway. You continue. A few hours later, you reach a roadside shrine. These are common enough, small stone altars dedicated to Mercury or sometimes Fortuna, usually tended by locals and occasionally left offerings of fruit, coins, or crusty bread no one wanted. This one's been recently cleaned. A fresh wreath of wildflowers hangs around Mercury's neck, and someone's lit a tiny oil lamp at the base. You pause, offer a silent thank you. You even toss in a pebble, your only available currency at the moment. Historians still argue whether these shrines served purely religious purposes or functioned more as psychological pit stops, a spiritual excuse to take a breather, stretch your back, and pretend the gods were watching over the mail. You continue on, and the road becomes hilly again. You count the steps in your head, not for any real reason, but because it keeps the rhythm of your pace steady. At 728, you lose count when a squirrel launches itself from a tree branch directly onto Lucilla's back. She freezes. You freeze. The squirrel chitters, then vaults off like a very fluffy gladiator. Lucilla exhales a breath that says, "I will remember this." Toward evening, you reach the outskirts of the next relay station, which is only just that: a pair of stone huts, a broken fence, and a stable that smells like triumph and onions. The caretaker, an elderly man named Otho, greets you with the resigned politeness of someone who's been waiting all day for exactly this interaction and still didn't want it. You hand him your manifest. He hands you a roll of fresh messages for the northern outposts. He warns you about bandits. You nod gravely. Lucilla yawns. Inside, dinner is barley porridge with a generous helping of something chewy and unidentifiable. You eat it anyway. Hunger always wins over discernment. That night, you sleep in the loft above the stable. You can hear Lucilla shifting below, snorting occasionally at memories of squirrels or possibly bureaucrats. You stare up at the wooden beams and think about nothing in particular, just the weight of the sky and how many steps you'll walk tomorrow. And somewhere in that quiet, something inside you softens. You are, despite the mud and the scrolls and the donkey-related delays, part of something ancient and strange and very, very human. The message matters. The road matters. And Lucilla, she matters most of all. You wake up with hay in your hair and the faint suspicion that a mouse slept near your ear. It's still dark, that deep velvet black just before dawn when even the stars seem to be holding their breath. Otho, the relay master, is already up, muttering to his stove and cursing the fire for being too damp or too dry or possibly just smug. He hands you a crust of bread and a handful of olives without comment. This is, in the courier world, an act of profound affection. You saddle up Lucilla, who doesn't bother pretending to enjoy early mornings anymore. Her ears swivel sideways in a universal expression of, "Why are we like this?" The new packet is lighter than usual, only 4 scrolls, each sealed and tagged for distant garrisons. One bears the stamp of a military tribune, which means it likely contains a detailed report on cabbage theft or a request for more javelins that will never arrive. You're headed into hilly terrain today. The road cuts through Etruscan territory, old lands full of silent tombs and stone ruins, where shepherd boys dare each other to whistle after dark. The Romans long since conquered the region, absorbed its gods and customs, and repassed them with Latin names. But the land remembers. And it does not always behave. The sky is a patchwork of cloud and copper light by the time you reach the first hilltop. From there, you can see the ribbon of road unfurling like a half-unwound toga across valleys dotted with fig trees, vineyards, and the occasional stubborn goat. The climb is steep, and you let Lucilla set the pace. She favors her left leg today, nothing serious, just the wear and tear of service. You promise her a proper apple next station. She doesn't believe you. She's right not to. By mid-morning, the wind picks up. It howls through the ravines like a bored satyr with a flute. Your cloak flaps behind you like you're trying to be dramatic. You fail. You reach a watchtower ruin around noon. It's mostly collapsed now, just two standing walls and a heap of moss-covered stone, but once it guarded this route from bandits, barbarians, and probably bored teenagers. You pause here to rest, to water Lucilla, and to spy a very determined tortoise making its way across the path with absolute indifference to Roman bureaucracy. You eat what's left of your bread. Lucilla finds something edible and alarming. You leave before identifying it. A little further on, you pass a pair of soldiers on foot. One has a bandaged arm, the other carries a satchel of chickens, neither particularly interested in protocol. They nod at your courier insignia and step aside. One of them mutters, "Still better than being posted in Dacia." You don't argue. Historians still argue whether couriers like you were considered military personnel, civilian contractors, or something in between. The imperial post was funded through a combination of taxes and private support, meaning you were technically both invaluable and disposable. A contradiction that feels oddly modern. As you descend into the next valley, the weather shifts again. Sunlight pierces through in golden columns, catching dust motes and dragonflies in soft suspension. The road curves along a ridge where shepherds have built low stone walls to keep in their woolly charges, although the sheep themselves seem largely uninterested in containment. A boy waves from a rock, holding what might be a carved wooden horse or the world's worst attempt at a lyre. You wave back. Lucilla snorts dust. You come to a small shrine carved into the cliffside. Not Roman, older. Etruscan script fades beneath moss, but someone's placed a fresh bunch of herbs in the offering bowl. You don't disturb it. Some places deserve your silence more than your footsteps. By late afternoon, your path narrows to a rocky switchback. The road here isn't built for carts, just feet, hooves, and stubbornness. You dismount and lead Lucilla by the reins. She follows without protest. She's better at this part than you. Halfway down the path, you slip. Not dramatically, just enough to land on your backside with a squelch and a fresh layer of mud in your elbow crease. Lucilla pauses, looks at you, chews, unimpressed. You get up, dignity as bruised as your tailbone. When you reach the next way station, it's already dusk. This one is small, barely more than a shed and a corral, but the keeper is young and friendly and insists on feeding Lucilla a pear from his personal stash. She accepts it with what might be gratitude, though she could just be testing for poison. You hand over 2 scrolls, record your passage, and receive a fresh packet bound north. As you bed down that night, this time on a pile of woven mats beneath a thatched roof that smells of barley and damp wool, you reflect on the strange shape of your life. You don't build cities, you don't shape laws, you don't command armies or sculpt marble busts. You just walk and carry and remember the route. But if you vanished tomorrow, a dozen messages would never arrive. A dozen decisions wouldn't be made. A dozen tiny gears in the Empire's vast machine would grind just slightly out of sync. And somewhere along the line, even Caesar would notice when his scrolls stop coming. You roll over, pulling your cloak tighter. Lucilla sighs in the dark, content. Tomorrow, more road, more dust, more slow, important steps. You sleep with your boots on, just in case. You wake before the birds when the sky is still the color of cold iron and the dew hangs on everything like the Empire's unpaid debt. The thatched roof above you creaks faintly as it settles from night into morning, and somewhere nearby a rooster is reconsidering his life choices. Lucilla stirs. Her ears twitch. She's ready before you are, of course. She always is. You rub your eyes, roll up your sleeping mat, and stretch until your spine sounds like a collapsing aqueduct. The station keeper offers you a bowl of gruel with dried figs. It tastes exactly how it sounds, like something that was made by committee and feared innovation. You set off while the mist is still rising, cloaking the road ahead in a soft veil that turns trees into ghosts and milestones into ancient phantoms. Today's stretch takes you along the Via Flaminia, a famous Roman road that once bore senators and soldiers in gleaming chariots. Now it bears you, your donkey, and a packet of scrolls containing requests for saddle soap and troop reinforcements. At a bend in the road, you pass a broken milestone inscribed with faded Latin and an outline of a man's face, probably the governor who funded this stretch of road. He looks vaguely annoyed, as if the road dared to crumble before his ego did. The stones beneath your feet are slick from the mist, worn smooth by centuries of traffic. Iron-shod wheels, sandals, and hooves pounding the same path over and over like history caught in a loop. You pause near a narrow bridge spanning a quiet stream, its surface glassy and dark. There's a farmer fishing with a line tied to a bent olive branch, humming an old Etruscan tune that's probably about goats and lost love. He nods without looking up. Further on, you encounter a woman leading a mule cart loaded with amphorae, clay vessels stacked so precariously you want to shield your eyes. She waves. One jug wobbles but holds. You both pretend not to notice. By late morning, the sun starts to break through the mist in golden shards. The air warms. Lucilla walks in rhythm with your footsteps now, the two of you a quiet percussion section in the symphony of the road. You crest a ridge and see the remains of a villa rustica, its collapsed roof and overgrown courtyard now serving as a residence for lizards and ambitious bees. There's something about ruined country villas, how the grandeur clings to the columns even when the roof has fled. You rest beneath a fig tree nearby. Lucilla finds a shady patch to chew cud and silently judge your posture. You snack on a handful of barley crackers that crumble like your optimism. Historians still argue whether these country estates were noble retreats or just glorified farmhouses with delusions of grandeur. Either way, they're good places for a nap if the bees agree. Back on the road, you hear the distant thrum of hooves, cavalry, courier, centurion with something to prove. It's another imperial messenger, this one on horseback, wearing the crimson tunic of a faster class. He gives you the courtesy nod that says, "I know you exist, and I won't report your muddy sandals." You offer a mock salute. He gallops past, scrolls flapping. Lucilla watches him go, chewing slowly, unimpressed. She's right, again. Horses may be faster, but donkeys never panic, never bolt, and they remember every insult. Around midday, you pass a small townlet clustered around a crossroads, whitewashed homes, a dusty inn, and a temple with more pigeons than prayers. Children run alongside you for a few paces, one daring to tug at Lucilla's tail. She responds by pretending not to notice, which is far more terrifying than a kick. You stop at a roadside tavern, nothing fancy, but the owner offers lentil stew and something that might be pickled onions or an aggressive experiment. You eat both. You may regret this. The tavern's back wall has graffiti, some obscene, some oddly philosophical. One reads, "I waited for the mail. It never came." You pat your scroll satchel in reassurance. You're trying, anonymous poet, you're trying. After lunch, the sky darkens unexpectedly. A summer storm brews, fast, loud, and indiscriminate. You rush to shelter beneath a fallen aqueduct arch, while Lucilla parks herself with enviable serenity. The rain drums above you like 1,000 angry scribes. You lean into the wall and let the sound fill your ears, imagining what it would be like to have an actual roof and a job that didn't involve goose attacks, lightning proximity, or bladder-straining distances between outhouses. The storm passes quickly. The road steams. Your cloak is soaked, your scrolls are safe, and Lucilla smells faintly of wet burlap and victory. As evening approaches, you arrive at a lonely signal tower, its fire basket unlit, but still functional. A soldier emerges, surprised to see anyone this late in the day. He checks your credentials and offers a spot by the hearth. You decline. Still a few miles to go. You press on through twilight. The road hums under your feet with residual warmth, and your muscles sing their usual song of complaint. You respond with a grunt and a promise of cheese at the next outpost. Lucilla perks up at that. You pass a tree-lined avenue planted by someone with ambition and symmetrical taste. The rows stretch perfectly in either direction, disappearing into the dusk like a corridor to nowhere. The birds are quiet now. Even the insects seem contemplative. You walk slower. Each footstep feels measured, like a heartbeat drawn long and soft. The sky fades from gold to violet to navy. You don't speak. You don't need to. Lucilla walks beside you, silent, steady, a donkey in a dream. You're nearly at the next station when the stars begin blinking into view, one by one, like the slow opening of the Empire's jeweled eye. You breathe in the scent of damp earth, pine sap, and a whiff of Lucilla's enduring presence. It's quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're walking through someone else's memory. The road here cuts across an open plain, flanked by olive groves on one side and the skeletons of an old aqueduct on the other. Its arches stand like the ribs of a sleeping titan, silhouetted against the darkening sky. You spot a weathered statue near the roadside, a minor deity, long eroded, its face now a melted blur of nose and ambition. Someone's left an offering of 3 walnuts and a coin, polished from the fingers of curious travelers. You doff your cap and pass by with a nod. Best not to ignore the gods of forgotten intersections. By now, your boots are damp, your shoulders ache, and you've become aware of exactly how many muscles exist between the base of your spine and your earlobes. Lucilla, by contrast, appears energized. She snorts as if to say, only 13 more days until retirement, and increases her pace. You do your best to keep up, though you're fairly certain she's doing this for sport. You reach the post station at last, a squat stone building with a smoke plume rising from the chimney. There's the familiar clatter of hooves inside, and the soft mumble of a station clerk sorting scrolls and cursing the concept of paper. He greets you with the cheer of someone who's seen 4 too many couriers today and offers you a bed of straw in the corner. You hand over 3 scrolls, accept a bowl of chickpea porridge, and finally sit. The world feels slower here. The walls are lined with ledgers, oil lamps flicker against worn marble, and someone has tacked up a cartoon of the emperor with donkey ears. You don't ask, you just nod in approval. Historians still argue whether the Cursus Publicus, the imperial postal system, was truly reliable or merely the least dysfunctional part of Roman infrastructure. Some claim it was a marvel of organization. Others point to the fact that messages still arrived 2 weeks late, often smelling like goat. Either way, you're the spine of it, one vertebra in a very long back stretched across the empire. That night, as you bed down in the corner beside Lucilla, the clerk offers a bit of unexpected hospitality, a handful of dried dates, and a story. He tells you about a courier once mistaken for a spy, who had to prove his innocence by quoting imperial edicts word for word. You suspect it's apocryphal, but the cadence of it is soothing. You nod off to the sound of Lucilla snoring gently and the fire popping in slow rhythm. The next morning, it's time to move again. The road today is flatter but busier. You pass a caravan of traders headed south, their wagons piled with dyed wool, sacks of salt, and a few suspicious-looking amphora they claim contain only olive paste. You do not press. You get caught in the slow flow of traffic, a reminder that the empire is not just grand parades and speeches from marble balconies, but this, creaking wagons, bickering drivers, and the scent of cabbage warming in the sun. Eventually, you break free and take a rural detour, a quiet trail that winds through vineyards. The vines are heavy with unripe grapes, guarded by crude scarecrows wearing faded tunics and expressions of eternal surprise. Lucilla eyes them suspiciously. You assure her they're not competition. At the far end of the vineyard, you pass an old woman carrying a basket of herbs. She pauses to chat, her Latin thick with regional lilt, and tells you about her son, a former courier now retired and raising bees. She offers you a sprig of rosemary for luck. You tuck it into your satchel. It smells like pine and old stories. The road returns, as it always does, winding past small tombs carved into a hillside. These aren't grand mausoleums, just humble family graves marked with faded inscriptions and wildflowers. You stop briefly and read a name aloud. It feels right to do so. The afternoon sun dips behind the clouds. A cool breeze kicks up, the air bringing with it the scent of crushed thyme and distant sea salt. You're still far from the coast, but the wind remembers. You reach a campus area, an open stretch used by soldiers for drills and travelers for rest. Today it's empty, except for a boy flying a kite made from parchment scraps and twine. It dances against the sky in uneven arcs, defiant of geometry. Lucilla seems briefly inspired, trotting ahead before deciding the kite is beneath her attention. You stop near a well, draw up water, and splash some on your face. It's icy, bracing. Your reflection stares back, grime-streaked, wind-blown, and strangely proud. Evening falls. The road curls around a grove of cypress trees, tall and still, like sentinels keeping quiet vigil over the path. You walk in their shade as twilight bleeds across the sky in streaks of lavender and peach. Lucilla slows beside you. Neither of you speaks. There's nothing left to say. Just more road. More footsteps, and a donkey who never forgets the way home. You wake to a soft tapping, rain, delicate as a sigh, falling on the tiled roof of the outpost. It's the sort of rain that doesn't try to soak you all at once, but instead seeps into your bones with infinite patience. Lucilla stands in the doorway, ears flicking, backlit by the murky gray dawn. She looks majestic in a soggy, unimpressed way. You chew the last of a fig roll someone left behind. Hard as a roof tile, but sweet enough to eat. The day's leg begins with a gentle incline. The Via Clodia, today's road, is narrower and less traveled than the imperial highways. Moss has started to claim it in patches, softening the edges of the once proud Roman stones. You pass a villa that's clearly abandoned, windows gaping, columns slumped like tired shoulders. Ivy clings to everything with the tenacity of unpaid debt collectors. A crow watches you from the lintel. You nod. The crow does not return the favor. Your boots squelch through puddles. The rain is picking up, falling in rhythmic sheets that drape the world in watery gauze. Still, you press on. Your satchel is waxed. The scrolls are safe. You, less so. You stop to share a bit of salted cheese with Lucilla under the sagging canopy of a roadside shrine. It's dedicated to Mercury, messenger god and patron of weary couriers. His likeness is barely visible anymore, just a suggestion of wings on sandals and a mischievous smile that's mostly chipped away. Someone's left him a chicken feather and a bronze ring. Mercury must be having a very specific week. Historians still argue whether these minor roadside shrines served more as spiritual recharge stations or emotional venting booths. Either way, this one feels like it's listening. You thank Mercury under your breath and move on. Mid-morning brings you to an ancient causeway, the stones wet but solid, and the landscape wide and yawning. The trees have pulled back here, revealing an expanse of rolling hills dotted with grazing goats and distant shepherds wrapped in wool cloaks that make them resemble ambulatory haystacks. One waves lazily. You wave back. A chill wind slices in from the east. You pull your cloak tighter and march on, heels clicking against history. At a bend in the road, you spot a boundary marker, one of those tall stone pylons that once defined Roman administrative districts. This one bears the insignia of a long-dead governor and the faint remnants of Latin too weather-worn to read clearly. Someone has carved a newer message beneath it. Gaius was here, twice. You feel oddly comforted by this. As you crest another hill, the sky splits wide. The rain stops. Sunlight pours in, hesitant at first, then bold, gleaming off the wet stones and turning puddles into little mirrors. The world warms. You exhale. Lucilla picks up speed, her hooves squelching with renewed enthusiasm. You reach a small hamlet, barely more than 4 houses and a shrine nestled beside a stream. A woman sells honey cakes from a stall. You buy one. She gives Lucilla a pet on the nose. Lucilla accepts, magnanimous as always. You nibble your cake while sitting on a stone bench. It's warm, spiced with cinnamon and maybe some clove. You close your eyes. You could fall asleep right here if Lucilla would just stop snorting crumbs off your tunic. You pass through the hamlet and onto a bridge built during the reign of Trajan, whose love for public works extended blessedly to postal infrastructure. The bridge still stands strong, arched, beautiful, worn by time, but not broken. Below, the stream runs fast and clear. You toss in the last crumb of your honey cake as tribute. It vanishes instantly. On the far side of the bridge is a mosaic mile marker, rare and slightly cracked, embedded in the road like a jewel. It depicts a courier, curly-haired, holding a scroll in one hand and leading a donkey with the other. His face is serene. His donkey looks suspiciously like Lucilla. You keep walking. The afternoon stretches ahead, golden and lazy. You walk in near silence, listening to the breeze rustle through dry grass, the faint tinkle of bells from sheep somewhere out of sight, and the steady rhythm of your footsteps alongside hooves. You reach an orchard where wild pomegranates have burst from their shells and fallen to the ground. You pick one, crack it open. The juice stains your hands, tart and bright. Lucilla refuses hers with haughty disdain. She's more of a barley biscuit girl. A pair of children wave to you from a hillside, one carrying a toy sword, the other a hollowed reed like a scroll tube. They race each other, laughing, pretending to be couriers in a great empire. You don't tell them the job includes lice, mud, and moral ambiguity. Let them dream. By evening, you arrive at a station built into a former temple. its columns now supporting racks of scrolls and saddle gear. The keeper welcomes you with a grunt and a plate of lentils. You eat quickly, grateful. Lucilla beds down in a stable with other donkeys. One of them immediately tries to assert dominance. She ignores him with the grandeur of someone who once kicked a legionary in the shin and got away with it. You lie down on a cot stuffed with straw and stare at the ceiling beams. They creak gently as wind brushes the roof. Outside, a flute plays somewhere, soft, off-key, but sincere. Your eyes close. The journey continues tomorrow, and the road waits, patient as ever. The morning opens with a haze that drapes the world in muted silver. The sun, lazy and uncertain, takes its time pushing through. You stretch beneath your wool blanket, the scent of last night's lentils still clinging to your tunic. A distant rooster offers a half-hearted crow, more of a yawn, really, before falling silent again. Lucilla is already awake. She stands in the courtyard with her head high and her tail swishing at flies with the grace of a retired matron who once ran logistics for a full legion. You feed her a handful of grain, murmur a greeting, and get back on the road. Today's path curves east toward the marble quarries of Luna, a place famous for supplying stone to temples and tombs across the empire. The road is scarred with cart tracks and hoof marks, evidence of generations of hauling more rock than any civilization had the right to need. The air smells like crushed limestone and time. As you pass the quarry, you hear the echo of chisels and hammers, steady, precise, and oddly soothing, like a marble metronome keeping time with empire and erosion alike. Not far ahead, a grave stele leans crookedly by the roadside. The Latin inscription is nearly gone, but a carved relief shows a donkey, plainly beloved, flanked by two solemn couriers. You stop. Lucilla does too. You both observe a moment of silence. Some historians think animals were rarely honored like this. Others argue that donkey memorials, while rare, carry deep meaning for those who relied on them daily. You leave a sprig of rosemary, still fragrant from your satchel, at its base. By mid-morning, the road dips into a coastal plain where salt breezes blow inland and gulls cry above empty fields. You can see the faint shimmer of the Tyrrhenian Sea in the distance. Uh, you taste salt in the air and feel something loosen in your chest, like a knot quietly unraveling. Lucilla picks up speed. She knows this route. It's familiar, the kind of road one remembers in the joints. You pass a field of broken amphorae, half buried in grass, likely the remnants of a merchant's mishap from decades past. A man with a cart sells wine in reused jars nearby. His sign reads, "Mostly untainted." You buy a small bottle anyway. It tastes like regret, but in a charming way. As you drink, you watch workers tending to a columbarium, a structure filled with niches for urns, names etched in fading lines. It reminds you how even in the humblest corners of the empire, people planned for permanence. Though, if we're being honest, the weather's done a better job of erasing than any invading army ever did. One of the workers tells you a story about a courier who once got lost in this region and survived a week on olives, raw fennel, and sheer spite. He claims the man eventually delivered the message only a month late. You believe it. By early afternoon, you pass a mile marker adorned with graffiti. Drawn in charcoal, it depicts a donkey wearing a toga. You laugh. So does Lucilla, or maybe she sneezes. Either way, the moment is shared. The heat rises, so you stop in the shade of a fig tree. The fruit is ripe, warm from the sun, and absurdly sweet. You share some with Lucilla. She chews like she's contemplating imperial succession. As you get moving again, the terrain flattens into tidal grasslands, buzzing with insects and the occasional heron lifting off in a burst of white feathers. The path is lined with sea glass pebbles and the occasional shell. You're nearly there. The next station comes into view, a modest building near the port town of Luna, surrounded by docked boats, children chasing chickens, and sailors trying to outcurse the wind. You deliver your final scrolls to the port courier, whose eyebrows disappear into his hairline when he realizes one of them is still dry. He thanks you with a biscuit that tastes like driftwood but was clearly baked with affection. Lucilla finds a shady spot and collapses into it, sighing audibly. You sit beside her, watching the waves lap lazily against the stone jetty. The salt wind tugs at your cloak, and the sound of distant lyres drifts through the warm air. You think of how far you've walked, how many gods you've greeted, how many muddy roads you've cursed. How many towns you've passed that don't even have names anymore. You think about the people you've met, and the ones whose names were etched into stones or fig trees or remembered only by donkeys. You're not famous, but you're part of the spine of the empire, the quiet machinery behind the marble. Tomorrow, another courier will head north with a satchel full of imperial orders, love letters, bad poetry, and grain reports. But tonight, you're still. And Lucilla, tired though she may be, gives you a nudge as if to say, "Good job, human. Let's sleep." Now the road lies behind you, unraveling like a long, faded ribbon across the Roman countryside. The dust of miles no longer clings to your boots. Your satchel is empty, your shoulders lighter. The air around you softens with each breath, like parchment curling gently in the warmth of an oil lamp. You lie on a straw mat beneath a sloping tiled roof, your body finally still. Outside, the waves of the Tyrrhenian Sea whisper against the shore, steady and low, like a lullaby composed by centuries. Lucilla breathes quietly nearby, dreaming perhaps of fig trees or outpacing emperors. The lights in the station dim one by one, flickering and sighing as if even the flames themselves are ready to rest. You let your thoughts drift like clouds over aqueducts and vineyard hills, past boundary stones and almond blossoms. There's no rush. The empire can wait. Somewhere far away, another donkey takes the first step of her journey. Another courier shoulders a satchel, wondering what lies down the next road. But here tonight, it's only you and the silence of a job well done. Let the night stretch long and cool like the shadows of cypress trees at dusk. Let each breath settle into rhythm with the sea. You are safe. You are still. You are home. And when the dreams come, let them be slow and sun-drenched, full of marble pillars and soft hay and the quiet clip-clop of Lucilla's hooves on stone. Sleep now. Sleep well.